I'm your host today, Adrian Evans, and absolutely delighted to welcome Ben Agnew, who is the CEO of the Payments Association. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you very much, and good to be here, Adrian.
Wonderful, wonderful. Obviously, we have a fireside chat on these podcasts with human-centric leaders in the payments industry, and we know one of the challenges in this industry is how do you create an organization that has success, but at the same time where people can have fulfilling careers based on their strengths and their passions. And for many that's a sort of diametric opposite, but the people we have on this show, they've got that aligned, and I think they come from a great place with their intentions. The common trend of everybody on this show as well is how they embrace the opportunities that are a plethora of in the payments industry before they see the challenges. Now, one of the most accomplished people with a reputation in the industry is Ben. And so that's why I'm delighted to have him on the show, because he works for the Payments Association, and obviously they have a very clear purpose. And that's to, and I'll quote here, to empower the most influential community in payments, where the connections, collaboration, and learning shape an industry that works for all. So, Ben, on that note, thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to come on the show.
Well, thank you for having me, as I said, and it's some illustrious company I keep with the other guests you've had on. So, not nice to be able to share some thoughts.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. So, I wonder if we start straight away with why did you join the Payments Association?
Yeah, so 2.5 years ago now. I think, look, largely because I wanted to learn a new business model in terms of membership and subscriptions, and of course apply some of my previous experience and skills to help grow the organization and have a real impact. But honestly, I had a few offers at that point, and I think part of the appeal of the Payments Association was just how purpose-led the organization was. So you've sort of echoed some of our mission statement and our objectives, but making payments work for everyone, and bringing the industry together to collaborate and ultimately do good. That was exciting to me, to be part of something bigger, and to be able to have a real impact in an industry and within society as a whole. I think that was quite a heady mix, really. That was quite a powerful combination, that naturally meant it was an organization I wanted to be a part of and see a big future with.
Wonderful. I'm just holding back here. There's so many questions that have just come up there, but I'm going to stick to script here, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So, I recently heard a number of people within the community as well that say that the Payments Association community is about partnership, is it about collaboration, it's about community. Can you share your lens on that? Because that ecosystem really does live by those things.
Yeah, it does. And I think, actually, we're really just being reflective of the wider payments industry in many ways. We're really just staying true to what's so unique about payments. Unlike other industries, the buy side and sell side dynamic, and when I say that, I mean in terms of who buys and who sells to who, it's far more complex in payments than perhaps other verticals or other industries. And companies that you compete with now could well become a partner, a supplier, or a customer in the future on other product or service areas. So you often see, and I've often seen this, is kind of a mentality of seeking mutual benefit or shared objectives. So people trying to add value to others and helping where they can. And I think, maybe at a macro level, you only have to look at the relationship between, say, banks, fintechs, and the regulator to see that working in practice.
Okay.
Partnership is a big route to market for lots of companies. You look at pooling resources, supporting each other with each other's respective networks and client base and so on. But for the Payments Association community itself, though, I think everyone wants to improve the industry and kind of buys into that concept that, we are stronger together. So, there will always be differences in views between different segments of the ecosystem. Of course, that's clear, but companies ultimately want to collaborate and do business. And, that's part of why companies ultimately join our community, because the exposure and access to a huge range of different businesses and people across those 200 members that we have at the moment. It is this broad church of companies representative across the payments value chain. And I think inevitably with that diversity, there's so much opportunity to connect and collaborate and find that mutual benefit, between companies or between individuals. So it's unique in many respects, but it's part of what makes payments so special in my view.
Yeah, I can only echo that as an experience myself in terms of the ecosystem. Can I just probe a little bit further there on the mindset though? Because you mentioned something really important there, which is actually that, so somebody today could be a competitor, yet not too in the near future, you could be partnering with them, or you could be forming, as I say, a partnership of some description. So what mindset do you need, therefore, to be able to adjust and adapt within that space?
I think a very open one, of course,
Yep.
and I think a mentality that says, innovation and disruption is a good thing rather than something to be feared.
Okay.
And I think there's that old adage, isn't there, of if you're too afraid to disrupt your own business, then someone else would do it for you. So, I think it's embracing the opportunities for change and diversity as a means of strengthening your own business as much as anything else. And you never know, someone might have developed something that would be a complete game changer for your route to market, or the kind of customer need that you've identified in the last 6 to 12 months. And actually partnering and working together means you fast track a solution into the market, or it accelerates your ability to do X, Y, and Z. So again, I think it's trying to understand what's happening in the industry. It's trying to understand what consumer-led initiatives really look like and require, and then how do we respond to that as a business, and is that individually, is that collectively? That I think again is at the heart of that desire to partner.
Brilliant. Wonderful. Because I think I've heard it say it as well, that it's, you can't do anything. You're talking about buy side and sell side earlier. Actually, in the payments industry, you can't do anything on your own. Never mind how big you are. You literally, you'd be an island. So I think that's fascinating how that's happened. And you just mentioned something there as well about being open and to innovation and seeing it as an opportunity rather than a threat, but also then about, embrace the disruption rather than because somebody's going to disrupt you at some point. Could you just elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I just think it's some of the sort of different pressures that you face within this industry. I think the pace of change, it's an industry that's constantly evolving, whether that's through digitization or those sort of macro pressures of decline of cash, behavioral wise, or the sort of push towards digital assets and blockchain, for example. There's so many big pressure points that mean the status quo won't remain permanently, that it can't. So I think to remain current, to remain active, I think that's again how so many companies would aspire to act and think. And that's a huge part of what we see continuously across our member base.
Wonderful. That brings us quite nicely then onto the sheer scale of the opportunities that are in the payments industry. But what excites you most about those opportunities?
Well, I mean, it's part of what I just mentioned in terms of the pace of change. I think there are so many massive consumer-led initiatives that challenge all of that previous thinking, and open up, all sorts of new opportunities, be that for products, be that for operating models, be that for finding new efficiencies, for example. And then the second thing for me in terms of what excites me about payments, I think it's probably the shift that we've seen in the role of payments. It's gone from being, a back office function, and you hear it a lot, the sort of analogy of it being the plumbing of financial services. But, it really has shifted, and now, you've seen it being a pressure point in a war, the conflict in Ukraine, and the very public discussions about the role of Swift, MasterCard, Visa, in that region. And then you also look at just how payments now is positioned at the very forefront of customer experience and requirements. Payments can be a huge enabler and differentiator for a bank or any business. So, again, I think what excites me is that pace of change and the role and importance that payments now has in society. I mean, it's always been at the crux of society. It's the exchange of value, and transactions make the world go round. But I really feel it's sort of elevated to almost a much more credible and accepted position within financial services now that perhaps a few years back perhaps wouldn't have been the case.
Yeah, fascinating to see that, because you just take me back there about the prominence and that conversation about what were MasterCard, Visa, and Swift doing in response to that. But that was at the heart of this, wasn't it? Because it enables commerce to happen. Yeah, very, very true.
And not always a comfortable place to be.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Payments isn't always used to being headline news. So again, it is just a dramatic shift, perhaps. But a good thing in many ways that people now see the potential that it can unlock as an industry.
Wonderful, wonderful. What about the challenges then? Again, if we could focus perhaps on the biggest challenges that the payments industry is facing that need to be, because I know the Payments Associate does an amazing amount of work here in terms of looking at the biggest challenges within the industry.
I think there's probably two big challenges that are important to me that we come together as an industry and rise to meet. And one is diversity, and the other is more around financial inclusion. But when it comes to diversity, we've got to do much more. This is a bit of a sort of hobby horse for me, but there aren't enough women in senior roles in the payments industry, and we're not representative of society as a whole. And I've personally attended far too many events where it's so dominated by white middle-aged men, and actually it's that diversity of thought as much as people. And that's what's going to drive innovation. That's what's going to safeguard the right outcomes for UK PLC and a consumer. So, again, that's a big one that I think we've got to work on as an industry. And then the second one I mentioned was that of financial inclusion. And whilst there's some incredible initiatives being driven, and we see a lot of them from our members already, but we've got to ensure that parts of society aren't left behind. With a decline in cash payments and in fact just the very access to cash, there are vulnerable groups and the unbanked, as we call them, that we risk leaving behind and would be unable to make or receive payments, which is such a huge part of living. So again, those are probably two big challenges that I think we need to meet as an industry, and ones that I do feel very passionate about. But yeah, you're right. As a community, as an association, we already have two very active working groups and projects where we harness those expertise from within our membership, and we look to make a real difference on both of those issues. So I am looking forward to see the continued outputs and activities within those those working groups within financial inclusion and within Project ESG in particular, and to see the impact that I hope we can continue to have in the year ahead.
Well, I can't believe this, Ben, but actually, they're actually as I say, as a career coach, diversity and inclusion is right at the heart of what I'm very passionate about. Just to share something for me is I want to positively impact 20,000 careers whilst I'm alive, and that includes 20,000 diverse careers. I'm from it's not a strong, rich middle class background at all, so I've experienced the diversity exclusion quite a lot personally. I'm very passionate about that. I do think, though, actually for whole of society, getting cognitive diversity as well, and that diversity of thought makes the difference. Just on the financial inclusion piece, I do think about, unfortunately, my mum has passed away now, but my mum never owned a credit card. She was never in debt, and she managed her budget phenomenally, and she managed it with cash. And I do think today, if she was still here, she'd be thinking, no, I want access to this amount of money per week, per month, because this is how I budget. This is what I'm about. She wasn't unbanked. She was definitely underbanked, as we would call it. But I think there's some really important piece to see. And I often think that actually when we're in a room and we're talking about this innovation and that innovation, I was thinking that there's 20% of society, possibly as high as that could be simply being left behind. So it's a passion we certainly share.
Agree. And it's those behaviors that we've got to be able to accommodate. It can't just be, one generation is driving the whole of banking and payments. It has to be society as a whole. And you're right, you see those trends accelerate in tougher times. People like to be able to visibly see their money and portion what I'm spending and know what's going out at all times, which can be obviously a security risk as much as anything else for a vulnerable group of people. So it's being able to support all of those groups, which is a big part of what we're looking to do.
Wonderful. To say that has a positive impact on everybody in society, and nobody getting left behind. So if you were advising a young, talented individual who potentially has many career options, why they should join the payments industry, particularly because there's many other industries they could join, why would they join? Should they join the payments industry?
Well, I think for some of the things that we've been discussing already around the pace of change within the industry, and the sort of unique approach to things like partnership and collaboration, for example. But I'd also just flag actually how important payments and fintech is to the UK economy and the government's growth strategy too. So we lead Europe and are second, I think, only to the US in terms of investment into fintech. So it's an industry that's driving innovation globally, and often the UK alone is the benchmark for other countries all over the world. So again, as a place to develop a career, it's constantly going to challenge you. It's exciting. It has a real impact on pretty much everything that anyone does in the world today. So those are just some of the reasons that I would advocate for a young, talented person to consider the payment space as a career option.
So the pace of change, the unique approach to partnership, the impact you can have on UK PLC, the fact that the UK is actually when they're driving this innovation globally, and not much gets done without payments. So just the five then, is it, Ben?
Well, I could go on. Those are pretty big ones, I would argue. So.
Exactly. Wonderful. Now, when it comes to your own career, who have been most influential to be the authentic leader you are? Because again, what I always do with this show, just to let you know this as well, is I always look at somebody's and I listen to what their reputation is within the industry. And you do have a reputation of being an authentic leader who is real, who is calm, who is poised, and who shows up as himself and allows others to show up as themselves. So I'd be really fascinated to say who have been the people that shape that and
So I think this is probably the hardest question you've asked. But I would say, look, there's so many different influences on my leadership style.
Okay.
Um, but I would probably say my children, though, in many respects, I think becoming a dad, for example, made me far more patient and emotionally intelligent as a leader. But equally, you learn a lot from your kids as well, to be curious and inquisitive, for example, to challenge, things that you've taken for granted, be that a way of doing things or just the way that things are, to listen, to be brave, to take risks. So actually, I think there's a lot you can learn as a leader just from children. I'm a big believer in that. And look, there's far too many people that I've worked with that I could call out on the example that they've set for me, and I don't want to embarrass anyone or offend anyone by missing people out.
Yeah.
So to give you kind of I don't know, more of an outside of work kind of role model perspective, I would probably say someone like Roger Federer. You look at his early years and the sort of anger, the aggression, the petulance, but to now how he carries himself as a man, he embodies everything that you should be. He's humble, he's polite, he's calm, he's unbelievable under pressure. He uses his platform for good. He's one of sport's big philanthropists. What drives him is that sort of sheer, determination, actually, harnessing his emotions to great effect. The way he analyzes, his commitment to what he does, and just to stay at the top level as he has for such a sustained period, constantly bettering himself. Incredible, man. So, I think I always look for examples of, how do I want to be perceived? Or, if someone meets you for the first time, what do they go away? What's the example that you've set? And I think it also echoes some of the things that we talked about at the very beginning. How can I help this person? What's the sort of mutual grounds or benefit that perhaps we can strike here? I think that those are some of the basic principles that I've always wanted to bring through in my leadership style, or how I interact with my staff or my clients, or different constituents of the industry that I might engage.
Wonderful, wonderful. Just really curious to reflect on that, actually, about the value of our children. And again, their imagination is just incredible. I have a daughter who's got an imagination that's it's a great place. She lives in her brain and her mind, put it that way. But really interesting there. But you mentioned about Roger Federer as well, though. But is the adaptation, because it wasn't always like that. And I'm a big fan of the value of the growth mindset, and the fact that actually, just because we were either born with that disposition or whatever, it doesn't mean we need to stay there. We can evolve, and actually, as there's certain lifestyle changes that sounds like we both had by one becoming a father, having children. There's some natural pieces, and I think we all get a lot more patient when we've got children, and our EQ definitely goes up. But what do you think about that adaptation then? And what advice perhaps would you give somebody to, in our audience, who wants to be a bit more poised and a bit more humble, but also to leave the next conversation you have with somebody in a positive way that has a positive human impact?
I think always be listening, is a huge part of it. Trying to understand, what someone's challenges and issues might be, and again, how you might be able to add value or assistance in some way. I think that's just good practice when it comes to doing business. But those are things that make you a really strong networker, for example. And I know you're a fantastic example of that, Adrian, as well. But those are the basic principles that, again, I think help you to do well in business. I think those are great principles to live by when it comes to meeting someone for the first time. And yeah, you're right with Roger Federer. I think it's that resilience. It was sort of, he's turned his emotions into a real strength. He's just channeled it in a different way. And you're right. The way you adapt, your biggest weakness could become your biggest strength. But it's a willingness to kind of learn and change is probably at the heart of it.
Wonderful. Yeah, I agree. I agree. That's so true. Thank you for acknowledgement. But I always look for this really sort of killer line, dare I say, throughout the podcast, and you've just given it to me. Always be listening. I think that's, and again, we've met a number of times, but I just think, just on that front, I see a number, and I always feel warm when I've had a conversation with you. Never mind how many brief or not, but it's interesting for me. Often people say to me, "How do I network?" And I say to people, give them a damn good listening to.
Yeah.
Because people quite often say, "What do I say?" And actually, quite often these days, people want to be heard. And so thank you. Always be listening. That's the one I'm going to, the line I'm definitely going to be as the headline. So thank you, Ben. Obviously, this is the standard sort of 21-year-old question now. This, what advice would you have given to your 21-year-old self if there was a couple of reflections as you look back now and say, well, this could have helped you a bit along the journey or shorten some of the curve?
Yeah, I've got a couple. I mean, I think, I take myself back to that age, some of which still is there, but, it was this trying to be a perfectionist, was part of it. That's still there under the surface with me. But no, I think one of the big things would be it's okay to fail, but fail fast so that you can implement those lessons and improve how you operate or how you manage, how you lead going forwards. And I think you learn far more from those disappointments and near misses sometimes than you do your successes. So again, it's a willingness to kind of embrace, mistakes or difficult, disappointing results, and actually turn that into something more positive. I think that would be one of them. And the second, and how I approach things now, which I think was a lesson from younger years, really, was just preparation and planning. I'm a big believer in this approach of, plan for the worst and hope for the best. So, being incredibly diligent in your approach to risk, or, kind of building that into your plans and preparations. I'd much rather have a considered and sort of modeled the different possibilities before actually executing on a strategy. What's your plan B? What's your plan C? Because as you know, I mean, hope alone is not a strategy. So that's,
it's not even a start. Well,
it's not even a start, really. You're right. But that's something that sort of stood me well, within my career, and something that I would impress on my 21-year-old self if I could go back in time, because it's an important lesson that I've learned over my career.
Wonderful. Well, Ben, this is where I normally try and sort of summarize our conversation and have sort of 2 or 3 critical points, but I'm sat in front of 2 pages of notes here. So can I just summarize what I've heard? Would that be okay?
Please do.
I think first of all, what's come across is your entry into the industry, and actually with a real desire to learn. There's been a thread to the whole of this conversation, is your desire to learn. But I definitely get a passion for the payments industry and the impact the payments industry has, but also the impact then the payments association community has. As you said, I love the aspect you said, look, it's a broad church, and there's disagreement in different elements, but actually you can't really do much on your own. And actually, even as a go-to-market strategy, partnering together, whether it's a network, etc., is absolutely vital. Mindset came up there as well. I thought that was really interesting. That's actually, you need to be open. You probably need to be polite and friendly as well, because today's competitor could be tomorrow's partner with how you're actually taking that forward. The industry is what came through, that the sheer pace of change. The industry's never been in this place. It's becoming more prominent, even at some of the political elements. The importance of financial inclusion and not leaving members of society behind. We know We know what isolation can do from that perspective, and the negatives of that. But diversity, not just demographic, but also cognitive and diversity of thought as well. I think the exciting thing was somebody entering the industry. There's so many reasons. I think you give 5. That sounds like you could give 15 great reasons why it's good for UK PLC, why UK is at the front of it, but actually why it's uniquely positioned as a partnership organization, sorry, partnership ecosystem. And then I love the fact you said it's your children who have actually, become, because they're curious, because they're open, they developed your EQ and your patience. And the example there of Roger Federer about how you can adapt and evolve traits that possibly aren't strengths today, but can be. But I think the sort of killer line for me is always be listening. So whether you're at an event, whether you're on a call, whether you're on an interaction, it's the lead. And also, don't be too hard on yourself, which is learn, do your diligence, be prepared, but also take some risk and be prepared to fail.
Exactly.
Is there anything else you'd add to that?
I think you've encapsulated that beautifully, actually. I'm not sure there is much to add. I think the only other thing industry-wise is just that actually there is opportunity in uncertainty. So again, always be on the front foot in terms of yes, this could become tougher, but actually if we develop something unique or responds to an emerging need, we've got a great opportunity here. So again, that's a big part of what I see across our membership base. Companies that do really, really well are the ones that aren't afraid to innovate and aren't afraid to collaborate or partner with new businesses. So yeah, that's the only other thing I would say that just sparked when you were talking there. But yeah, absolutely, I think we've had a really good talk through some of those key issues, but yeah, no, I've enjoyed it. It's been a great opportunity to discuss.
Excellent. Well, look, I think the that final point you just made there, I think is wonderful as well. Because I was only having a conversation, a lot of people saying, where's the industry going, what it's doing, and it feels like sort of a slight deflation, somebody was saying to me the other day compared to this time last year. But I love the fact that what you just said about embrace that uncertainty, because actually it will serve yourself and your customers and the ecosystem in the future.
Indeed. Yeah,
wonderful.
Indeed.
So Ben, thank you very much indeed for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm sure the audience are going to appreciate your insights and your wisdom on that front, and the sound advice you've given. So thank you.
Good stuff. Look forward to catching up soon.
Thank you.